nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical.
National headlines, Georgia State news and sports, and the local stories you care about. News Talk 1330 WLBB, Carrollton.
Good Monday morning. Welcome to the WLBB Community Voice program. Our show brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. I'm your host this morning, Colin Worthington. We are on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3 this morning, and also on Facebook Live. Visit the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page, and you can already see who my guest is. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know that I'm kind of a baseball fan, and take this time of year during the All-Star game and during when baseball season starts every year, I'm kind of selfish and try and get a show on where we can talk about baseball and have to focus on how it affects us locally, how it has something to do with Carrollton or Carroll County, and I'm able to do that a lot of times. Last year had Tim Criswell and his son, who was recently picked out by the Los Angeles Angels, had them on the show last year. A couple of years before that, we had Todd Pratt. He was catcher in the major leagues. He was a coach over at West Georgia Technical College baseball team for a little bit. And recently had David Kelton on the program as well. Well, this morning, we're going to talk about the history of Carrollton baseball, minor league baseball in the city of Carrollton. Good buddy Jay Gill pointed this book out to me. It's called Pickle It. It's called Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia, written by John Bell, who is a Carrollton resident, and I appreciate him coming out this morning to talk all about this book.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And this book is available out there, and I think he's going to try and make some available to the community here, maybe after this program sometime in the coming weeks. I was able to find a copy at Underground Books, and thank you to them for making that available. Or you can go on Amazon.com and purchase that book for $750.
Yes, and I don't get near that for a royalty on that.
Well, somebody loves it. We're thinking somebody really loves this book, but they're willing to give it away for $750. Again, John Bell, our guest this morning. The book is called Pickle It. Let's first find out what that means.
Okay. Well, Pickle It was a phrase that was heard in the stands during the 1920 season, the first year that Carrollton had an official minor league team. There were two large pickling vats on the opposite side of the center field fence. There was a local cucumber processing, pickling company located there. And so they had these large vats that were just on the other side of the fence. And so when the fans wanted a player to hit a home run, they would actually yell, "Pickle it," which literally meant to hit the ball into the pickling vats. And so that's where the name of the book came from.
So I was thinking of the game pickleball. That has nothing to do with it then at all.
No, not really. Because at first I read this, and it came from an old microfiche of the local newspaper, and I saw that and thought that's the title right there. That's the name of my book. Even though I was nowhere near having enough material for a book at that time. Again, I was only in 1920, and then there were 9 other seasons following that throughout different time periods. But that just seemed to stick with me the entire time. I thought that's one of those interesting stories. You wonder how does that even come about. And again, you mentioned the term in a pickle or being in a pickle or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it kind of gives, it's sort of a new meaning for the phrase "pickle it," or using the word "pickle" in baseball.
And it originated here, or maybe similar ballparks in the area?
No, it actually originated here. I've never heard "pickle it" anywhere else. And I've done extensive baseball research on different topics. And this was, it just seemed to be fascinating to me that the term "pickle it" literally meant to hit the ball into a pickling vat. So I'm hoping no one ever got a jar of pickles with a baseball in there, but that would be a pretty cool thing to pick up.
Would be. Obviously, to do something like this is a labor of love. You and I talking before the show, you kind of like baseball a little bit.
Yes.
You talk about the microfiche, and to go through that, that's like going through that microfiche is, it's almost like driving through the curvy roads in West Virginia and getting car sick.
It does take some practice
Motrin or something like that.
Exactly. Take some Dramamine or something when you're doing that. But yeah, it takes some getting used to. But once you get the hang of it, it's like driving a new car.
Well, you did write this book. It was early 2000s, but it wasn't your first book. You'd written one prior to this.
Yes, I had. In 2001, I wrote a book called Shoeless Summer, which is it's a chronology of the summer of 1923, when Shoeless Joe Jackson played baseball in my hometown, Americus, Georgia. Growing up in Americus, I'd always heard that Joe Jackson had played ball there at some point. Nobody really knew anything. Any time I would ask some of the older residents, they would say, yes, he played here. And that was really all anyone knew. So I started doing some research, and I found that it was the summer of 23, and that the team started off. It was going to be an 8-week-long season, and about 3 weeks into the season, shortly into the season, the team was having financial difficulties, and they were looking for new talent. And from Bastrop, Louisiana, was this team that was being led by Joe Jackson. That they were a traveling club and couldn't keep games because they were just beating the pants off of everybody else, and so they all loaded up and came to Americus and basically became the Americus team.
Does Americus promote that at all now? Is there any kind of marketing tool they're using to?
I'm not sure if it's being promoted. I do know there's a baseball park that still stands in Americus that was actually built later. It was built in 1936, 37. That served as the minor league ballpark there, and there's a plaque at that stadium. The stadium's been refurbished a couple of times, and it's still in use for certain events in baseball games. The high school plays there, but it's a really beautiful structure to see that old ballpark. It's in its basic original form still, but the plaque commemorates Joe Jackson having played in Americus, even though the ballpark was located a few blocks over when he played.
John Bell, our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. He's author of a book called Pickle It, focuses on minor league baseball of Carrollton, Georgia. And we talk about this is 1919. Joe Jackson played with the Black Sox, so we're right at 100 years on that story. And coming up on 100 years since minor league baseball started in Carrollton, 1920.
Yes.
When this started.
Yes.
I guess put in context what minor league baseball was like then. I mean, can you compare minor league baseball at that time to the way we understand it now? It's
similar in ways that it allows a lot more players to participate in professional baseball, and there's a difference in you see a lot of minor league teams, and then there are a lot of semi-pro teams or semi-pro teams or industrial league teams that they were known as way back. Had a lot of other titles as well, but the official minor league teams are currently under the umbrella of minor league baseball, and most of them have a player development contract with a major league club. Well, back in 1920, the first year Carrollton played, most teams didn't really have a player development contract per se. There was some loose affiliations, one player on the Carrollton team or the manager may have played with a certain club at some time in his career. And he still knows the general manager up at in the Philadelphia Athletics or something like that, and so he can say, I got a line on this shortstop, you should really take a look at him, something like that. But it's similar in that regard, but it's quite different. There's also a great deal of support from the major league clubs nowadays as well with the minor league teams that wasn't in place at that time. Currently, minor league baseball players are paid by the major league club that owns the player development contract. Back then, they weren't. They were paid by the local club, and so a great number of local baseball teams had financial difficulties. That just seemed to be a common theme.
So were they considered professionals, or did they have other jobs they had to maintain?
Quite often they did. During the research of Pickle It, I talked to Herb Shorty Marshall, who some residents may remember him. He played from 46 to 1950 for Carrollton, and he mentioned to me that he worked during the off season and sometimes during the regular season at Mandeville Mills. He was a supervisor there.
I would expect a lot of those ball players to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And being a supervisor there, he was able to get some of the other players on as employees there if they needed to be.
How did the team start in Carrollton?
There had been, like I said, the semi-pro or industrial league teams for a few years before the official team came about. ambitious local residents decided let's try to have a baseball team that's the real deal. Let's try to get one that's a real minor league team. And they were starting up the Georgia-Alabama League late in 1919 for the 1920 season, and Carrollton showed interest, and everything just came to fruition.
And was it enough to be entertainment where people wanted to see and be part of it? That just loved baseball
yes,
so
yes.
much?
It was, there was no television back then. So from 1920, 1921, that was a really good time to go out to the games, and all games were day games back then. Not many stadiums had lights, so there was it was good entertainment. You were home by dark pretty much every time, and it was a lot of great fun.
And it's not too uncommon to think about Carrollton, because there were a lot of small towns in Georgia and Alabama and Florida that did have these ball teams. Right?
There were at one point in the height of minor league baseball, which was just following World War II. There were 458 official minor league baseball teams throughout the country. Now there's around 130, 140, something like that. But so there were just a number of teams, and there was always one close by. If your town didn't have one, there was the next town over probably did.
The Carrollton team have a good looking logo and uniforms. And
oh yeah, it was interesting that the 1920 and 21 team didn't have a nickname, but the 1928 the next time we were part of official minor league baseball, the team was called the Frogs, Carrollton Frogs. So that was a good moniker to have, I think. Not really sure where that came from. I never found out. But 1929 and 30, because the 28 team won the league championship, we called ourselves the Champs. So the Carrollton Champs in 29, and then again in 1930. And then from 46 to 50, post-World War II, we were the Carrollton Hornets.
And that may be the one I remember the most. And I want to say, I've been here for 10 years. And I want to say the first year I was here, I spoke to the gentleman whose father may have run the Hornets.
Right, Harvey Copeland.
Harvey Copeland.
Yes.
Yeah. And I believe he's recently, he's not with us anymore.
Right,
Harvey.
right.
But is there what do we have that's saved from that time? Do we have any memorabilia that's saved? And it would be interesting to see it stored somewhere.
I'm sure that there are a few things around. I did, while I was researching, I was able to contact a few former players, and they were able to, they loaned me a few items that I photographed and put in the book.
Sure.
Yeah, that kind of thing. There's a pennant somewhere. I really don't know where it is. I'm hoping it's somewhere safe. But from one year when Carrollton won the pennant from the Georgia-Alabama League, baseball commissioner Happy Chandler came to town and presented the pennant to Harvey Copeland Sr. And so I'm hoping that would surface at some point. I would really like to just take a look at it.
And it's a legitimate felt pennant. It's triangular.
It's actually it's a large flag.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it could be. And at that time, they wanted it to be seen from. You fly it on its own flagpole, I guess. I think it would be improper to put it with the American flag, but maybe put it on its own flagpole out in center field, so visiting fans can take a look at that and be envious.
Trying to put in as much as I can here in a half-hour program.
Sure.
I know we got to take a break, but where did they play here in Carrollton?
The first years, 1920 and 21, there was a ballpark on South Street. And that's I've got my drawing of a map in the book that shows exactly where that was. And then the next 1928 and then up until the 1946 through 1950 team played behind the old high school. There's still a section of the stands in place on the hillside behind the old high school. And so if anybody rides by there, in fact, that's the on the cover of the book, it looks like bleachers there that are made of concrete, and there's a big picture of a baseball. That's just a ball that I put there, but that's actually the stands from the old baseball park.
Cool. Local author John Bell, our guest this morning. His book is called Pickle It, Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia, and that's what we're focusing on this morning, the history of minor league baseball in Carrollton. I think it's cool, and again, I told you I'm kind of being selfish this morning to bring a guy in here to talk about baseball for a half hour. We'll take our first break, come back and talk more with John Bell about minor league baseball in Carrollton. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. News Talk 1330, FM 106.3.
A well-rounded education includes much more than just academics. At Oak Mountain Academy, we encourage our students to find their niche in any of our 42 co-curricular opportunities. Over the past 5 years, we have brought home 5 state and 20 regional athletic titles. Our one-act play and literary teams continuously compete at the region and state level, and our academic teams bring home first place more than not. We are warriors creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org. or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
.845, welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice program. Our show brought to you by Tanner Health System, Oak Mountain Academy. News Talk 1330 FM 106.3 in this morning. You can catch us on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page as we broadcast live until 9 o'clock this morning. My guest this morning is John Bell. His book is called Pickle It, Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia. It's not a new book. It's been out there for about 18 years.
Yes.
But I was able to get a copy at Underground Books in Carrollton. If you want to stop by and check them out. Or, again, as we joked, you can go on Amazon.com and buy their copy for $750. But and that's not a joke, actually. That's the truth.
I wish that was a joke.
Yeah. John Bell, our guest this morning. Notable players that played for Carrollton or even came through Carrollton with other minor league teams, some names that we might recognize, or some guys that had some outstanding stats that might have gone up at least to the major leagues. Actually, there's a lot of ball players that did spend a little bit of time in the major leagues. Moonlight Graham was in here. No.
There was I think 19 players that had played in the major leagues either before or after they spent time in Carrollton. Quite often, if it was a player who was a player/manager of the club, it may be a former major leaguer. Maybe he had a cup of coffee in the majors. Maybe he spent a season or two, and that was for several reasons. First of all, the player typically had a great deal of experience on the field, and so he was good at developing young players, and as well as even though he wasn't up to par to play in the majors any longer, he could still show off in front of the home crowd. So that's the kind of thing. Like in 1928, there was a pitcher named Paul Fittery who had played in the major leagues for several seasons, and he could still throw a lot of just really, really nasty cheese across the plate. And so the opposing batters were baffled by his pitching, even though he was well into his 40s at the time he was playing for Carrollton. One player always comes to mind, and that's Charlie Red Roberts. That was a local. He was actually from Carrollton, and he's Carrollton's first major leaguer, first Carrollton local to make it to the major leagues. He actually played for a short time in 1943 with the Washington Senators, the first iteration of the Senators that became the Minnesota Twins eventually. But Roberts was. He was from here. He lived here, and then he played here actually while he was in the minors, and then again after his major league stint, he was back here as a player manager in the same situation that I mentioned previously. I think a highlight of the short time that Roberts was with the Senators was he hit an inside the park home run at Yankee Stadium. And it was a game-winning home run, so it was a pretty cool situation. It was September 5th, 1943, I believe, a Sunday game, and it was the top of the 8th, and it was a tie game, 2-2. And he came to the plate with one out, and nobody on, and he hits one into the gap between left and center, and just took off like a rocket and made it all the way around. And so that's game winning. Inside the park home run.
Similar vein of a guy being from Carrollton and playing on this team. Are there any stories that you're familiar with that some guys maybe come here to play baseball and end up staying in Carrollton?
Yeah, there were. I mentioned Herb Marshall or Shorty Marshall a few minutes ago. There were a number of others that would that would hang around here for a short time, and then quite often these ball players were they always wanted to get back out on the field. You got to get your cleats dirty, and so another team would call down in LaGrange or over in Noonan or something, and they would say, hey, we got a spot for you here, and so off they go again. Not that they're traveling salesman by any means, but that's just kind of the nature of it. A ball player wants to play ball.
Absolutely, John. Even at 46 and as out of shape as I am, I still have that image. That you think you can go out there and do it. John Bell, our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. His book is Pickle It, Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia, and a lot of research in here.
Yes, and you mentioned it's a labor of love. This, I would approach anything I'm doing, I'm going to do my best at it. But if I'm doing research, it's typically just for my own benefit initially, and then if I get a lot of information on something and I think, wow, I wonder if anybody else would want to know about this, that's when I start to think, could this be a book? Maybe. I don't know. And I'm usually the last person to agree that yes, this should be a book. But I'll get other people to look at it and say, yes, this should be a book. And I don't know. I'm my own worst critic, I guess, is where I'm getting at. But I was when I was researching this, I was still kind of on the fence about whether or not I should do it, and so I started talking to Hiram Bray, a former news guy from the newspaper here way back, and he was looking at what I had done, and he said this should definitely be a book. And I thought, well, okay, if this seasoned news guy is telling me that I should do this, then yes, and I agreed to, as long as he wrote the foreword, and so.
And he did.
He did, yes.
150 pages, a lot of pictures in here too. How do you accumulate all those pictures?
The photographs are that's one of the most fun things to get. I mean, I like the stats, I like the stories, but photographs are like they say, a picture has 1,000 words or speaks 1,000 words, and so or tells a story, and so finding photographs was just a lot of fun. Former players, and one guy knows another guy, and so I called another player. Some of them came from a photograph collection at the time that had recently been donated to the library at the University of West Georgia into a special collection, and so that was fun to go through and dig out photographs from that collection as well.
And it's a nice mix of actual ball players, and it is interesting to see, while their standing is is kind of posed and everything. Mm-hmm. We're not getting the over smiles that we get now in pictures and things. I mean, you just you can see the character in their face in these pictures. And as much as I like the pictures of the ball players, you do have some marketing material, which is always interesting to see. Where it's promoting the baseball team coming, mm-hmm. Playing that day and their schedules. So definitely an interesting read. It's called Pickle It, Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia. John Bell is the author, and he is our guest on this morning's Community Voice program. We'll come back with about 6 minutes. We'll take our final break. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, and this morning on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our daily schedule includes convocation, prayer, and the Pledge of Allegiance. By doing so, we build a family-like community where all students grow and flourish and personal faith is encouraged. Through community service and a historical approach to biblical study, our students are taught the value of the warrior way, honesty, respect, and responsibility. Oak Mountain Academy. We are a family creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
.54, welcome back to the WLBB Community Voice program, brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. I'm your host this morning, Colin Worthington. Got about 5 minutes left in our program. Our guest is John Bell. He's authored a book called Pickle It, Minor League Baseball of Carrollton, Georgia. Also, his first book had to do with Shoeless Joe Jackson playing in Americus, Georgia. So another interesting, well, for me anyway, for baseball, a baseball fan, another interesting topic. You and your wife, I believe you guys published this book yourselves, right?
Yes, we did. The first one we did, obviously, was Shoeless Summer in 2001. When I finished writing, or was close to finishing the writing of Shoeless Summer, I was shopping around for a publisher, and the best that I got from any publisher was they said, we can publish it in 18 months. And I don't sit still very easily. In fact, anybody that's been watching on Facebook probably sees me fidgeting here. The 18-month lead time was too long for me, and so I started doing some research into how to publish books. And growing up, my dad had a print shop, and we did a few books for certain people in town down in Americus. And I thought, well, I know how a book is put together. I know the basic construction of a book, and so I started doing some research on the legal side, the Library of Congress, copywriting, that kind of thing. And it was all fairly simple, and so we thought, well, let's give it a shot. The only really, I'd say, difficult part of it was that we had to outsource the printing of it, and the minimum I could get from any printer was going to be 500 copies, and so that was going to be kind of a lot of money to lay out for. It was really a gamble. Is anybody going to buy this book? I have no idea. So we thought, well, we'll give it a try, and so it seems to have done pretty well. We're in our fifth printing of Shoeless Summer now, and so it's done pretty well over the years.
Vabella Publishing. What does the name come from?
Oh, Vabella. Okay, this is interesting. My wife's name is Virginia, and throughout the years she's abbreviated. Yeah, she's abbreviated her first name with VA, like the state, Virginia. Her last name being Bell, and then she came up with the name Vabella. Bella is beautiful in Italian, and so it just kind of turned into VA Bell, VA Bella, Vabella. That's just sort of the genesis of Vabella.
In this book, you also dedicate this book to your two sons. I'm guessing at the time they were probably under 10 years old.
Yes, they were. Excuse me. They were actually at 2002. So my oldest was 3, and my second son was just born. And so that was. They're one of them is a huge baseball fan still. One of them, he could take it or leave it, but he's got other interests, just like everybody does.
It's not easy to maintain that interest in baseball nowadays, for kids. I mean, it's so many other things to keep them entertained.
Exactly. Yes, they're as long as we're interested in something, I think find your passion, stick with it, whatever it is, and do your best. Swing for the fence on it.
Well, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but we did mention in the early part of the show the Joe Jackson topic, kind of relate him to 1919 with the Black Sox scandal, and then baseball in Carrollton goes back to 1920. Any kind of supplements to the books or additions to the books that you might put on, just as we're in that time frame?
We're talking about doing some kind of maybe a 100th anniversary edition in a few years on Shoeless Summer. A few more photographs have surfaced. There was only one that I actually found during the research of Shoeless Summer, and so we're I'm always on the lookout. But being such a kind of a small niche kind of league that Jackson played in at the time, because he couldn't play in organized baseball, having been banished at that time. It's hard to find any real information or more photographs.
Well, John Bell, the author of the book Pickle It, and it's about minor league baseball of Carrollton, Georgia. Very detailed book. Little box scores in there, stories from the paper that came out at that time. So I do encourage you, if you're a baseball fan, to check it out. If you're a fan of history of Carrollton, want to know more about that, that's an interesting pickup. And I appreciate you coming out this morning. Great to meet you.
Thank you, Colin.
And talk baseball for a whole half hour on the Community Voice program. I'm saying Tanner's on the show tomorrow. Is that right, Steve Graddick? We suspect Tanner's on the program tomorrow, so hope you'll tune in at 8:30 for Luke Lukert, who will be the guest. Thanks to Joel Brock for doing the camera work this morning. Thanks to Steve Graddick for pressing the buttons. And we appreciate you listening and watching the Community Voice program this morning here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3.